guys, and welcome back to another Chill Wave ASMR. Super excited to be here today, discussing some very interesting medical facts. Also chewing gum. This video was requested some time ago by a viewer who liked the interesting facts video and thought maybe I should do a medical one because I work in medicine. So, that's what I'm going to do today. I'm really excited about it. I think it'll be a lot of fun. Some of the facts that I'll be going through today, I've come up with. Well, I didn't come up with. I pulled them from the world. Some of them are from the internet. Completely unvetted. Not really relevant to like the day-to-day life of like a practicing doctor, but still kind of interesting nonetheless. I'll make sure that I indicate which is which so you know. Because I'm not really about trying to spread misinformation. And some of this stuff is really interesting and neat, but I don't know if it's like fully 100% accurate. Because looking at a couple different lists and stuff, I can tell that there is some, even with the same facts on different sites and stuff, it's like they kind of compare a little bit, but there's some like interesting differences. So yeah, so this will be a really fun video. I'm super excited about it. So let's dig in. So I'm going to start by going through some of the facts that I've kind of brought up. And if you've got any kind of questions or thoughts about this stuff, throw it in the comments section. If you've got other suggestions for things that I should go through or read or discuss while chewing gum or otherwise, definitely let me know because I'm super open to it. This should be a lot of fun though. I'm really excited. Okay, let's have a look. There is a genetic factor that makes you more likely to sneeze, and specifically when you look at light. Interesting tidbit about me. I actually have this gene. It's transferred in what's called an autosomal dominant pattern of inheritance, which means that if one of your parents have this, there's a 50% chance that you will have it. That's if they're a carrier of it. If they're full-on with it, then you're definitely going to have it. So, I definitely have it, and my brother also has it, and so I think probably one or both of my parents have it, and we just got the luck of the draw. It's hard to say. So, basically what this means for me is that if I walk outside on like a really bright sunny day, I will fully sneeze. And I can keep looking at the light, or like any bright light, and sneeze. Now, it's not all the time, but it's a lot of time. And so, if you ever see me outside and I'm just kind of like looking off into the light, I'm probably trying to bring up a sneeze or something. So, anyways, that's an interesting little tidbit and a factoid about me, in case you were interested. Okay, athletes have a lower resting heart rate. Now, this is especially true for athletes with enhanced cardiovascular fitness. And so what I mean by that is like endurance athletes that do a lot of like running, cycling, swimming, and stuff like that. And so what happens is your heart becomes more efficient, so it needs to pump less often to circulate blood. The other thing that happens is that the resistance in your blood vessels and stuff is not as a big of a problem for them because they're used to going out there and training hard and doing all this. So it's cardiovascular conditioning, but it's also the compliance of your blood vessels and stuff. So over time, as you're training and getting more and more into, athleticism and stuff like that, your resting heart rate, the basic heart rate, like maybe while you're laying in bed, that level will decrease over time because your heart just gets more efficient at pumping and stuff like that. So that's pretty cool. For me, I do triathlon, and this is something that I've experienced. And so it's funny being at work, and if I put the monitor on, it starts alarming because my heart rate is so low. It's just a funny, kind of interesting tidbit. And what's interesting is one time I was volunteering, providing medical care at an Ironman World Championship event in Hawaii. And the athletes would be considered to be a high tell you, oh, this is not good for me, this is good for me. It's just kind of an interesting thing. With athletes like that, they spend so much time thinking about it, and so they just are more fluent in discussing it as well. So, kind of an interesting tidbit. Okay, here's one. Why do we sleep? We sleep for a lot of reasons. For example, our brain goes through this process called neuroplasticity, which is like kind of consolidating memories and repackaging memories and things like that, and kind of solidifying things like that. So sleep is really important for your memory health and for brain health that way. So if you're studying for a big test, it's really important that you're getting lots of sleep. The other thing that happens while you sleep is that your body starts trying to deal with and process waste products, things like oxidative free radicals and things like that. It's trying to kind of go through all that and kind of get rid of all the waste products and stuff like that. So sleep is like a very healing, very regenerative process. And so sleep is like one of the most important things. And there was a study done looking at daylight savings time and the number of health outcomes that were negative when the clock springs forward and people lose an hour. Even 1 hour lost of sleep has a measurable impact on the health of a population. So, just a thought, kind of an interesting thing. Okay, so we know that when we're sick, sometimes if there's a bacterial infection that's causing the illness, we need to go on antibiotics. Some antibiotics can increase your likelihood of having a tendon rupture. So the tendons are what attach to the bones and then the muscles to allow for our muscles to contract and our bones to move. And so what can happen is certain antibiotics can increase the likelihood that one of those will pop. Not good. So, a lot of people would say, well, the doctor didn't give me an antibiotic. And that may be because, it was likely that you had a viral illness or that you didn't really qualify from a guideline perspective to get an antibiotic. But a lot of people would say, well, they should just put me on one because it's harmless. But antibiotics have a lot of risks associated with them as well, and that's one of them, tendon rupture. So think about it. It's not all antibiotics, but some of them can. Okay, this little induration here is called a philtrum. The little hook in your ear where your earbud sits is called the tragus. The more you know. Okay, here's a good one. There are tiny calcium crystals called otoconia that are in your inner ear. And those little crystals are attached to nerves, and they shift their position according to gravity. And so what that does is it relays information about your position in space to your brain so that your brain knows whether or not you're upright or sideways or whatever. And so what can happen is sometimes if you get knocked on the head or if you fall or something like that, or sometimes just randomly, or sometimes because of like an ear infection or something, you can disrupt those little crystals and then it throws off the signals that's going to the brain. And so you get this thing called vertigo, where you feel like the room is spinning. It's a terrible feeling. And you just get this kind of like spinning, terrible sensation. It makes you feel nauseous and stuff. It's awful. But there's an exercise that you can do if you have that kind of vertigo. It's called the Epley maneuver. And you can, through doing this exercise, try to reposition your crystals. And when I'm telling people about this, they always think that I'm talking about some kind of voodoo medicine or something. Repositioning crystals, that sounds crazy, but it's a real thing. The Epley maneuver. Now keep in mind there are a lot of bad things that cause vertigo too. So if you're having vertigo and you're worried about that, you should definitely go and see someone for it, because not all vertigo is like safe and not a big deal. Some of it is a big deal, so something to think about. Okay. Another one. We were talking about antibiotics. There is no cure for the common cold, and there's like over 100 different viruses that cause the common cold. And so a lot of people, when they get like runny nose and sore throat and a cough and that kind of thing, they might think that they need to be on antibiotics. But it's important to get checked out for that, because it's important to determine whether or not it's a viral illness or a bacterial illness to determine whether or not antibiotics are even necessary. Because for the most part, for the common cold, for the average person, for like the run-of-the-mill, kind of otherwise healthy person, there's really nothing to do about it other than getting as much sleep as you can, getting as much rest as you can, and just giving your body what it needs to fight the infection. So, no cure for the common cold. Crazy. There's obviously some things that we can do that help kind of reduce, the negative outcomes of bad infections of viruses, like for example the flu shot and other things like that. But in any case, there's no actual cure. Okay, here's another interesting one. There is a little bone in your wrist. It's called the scaphoid bone, and there's a bunch of little bones in here, and they help kind of with the rotation of the wrist, like this. And the wrist is kind of a complex joint. It has to move in a lot of different weird ways, and so all those bones kind of articulate around each other to allow you to be able to do that. Now there's one called a scaphoid bone, and it gets its blood supply from only one side of it. So if you fall and fracture that bone, and first of all, it's really easy to not see it on an x-ray. It's a tough fracture to catch right away. And the other thing that can happen is you can cut off the blood supply to the other side of it, and then that part of the bone just kind of erodes and stuff like that. Another fun fact about me, that happened to me when I was a teenager. I was snowboarding and I hit a jump and I fell and landed on my wrist kind of out like that. And I chipped that bone, and that part of the end part of the bone didn't get the blood supply that it needed to heal, and I needed to end up going for a surgery. So kind of a crazy thing. Okay, this one might be one of my most favorite interesting facts of the day. Okay, imagine getting struck by lightning. Terrible, terrible. I don't suggest that. There is a classic marking that people get, like a scar, as a result of surviving a lightning strike, and it looks crazy. And I'm gonna put a picture on the screen so you can see it. It's called a Lichtenberg formation, and it looks wild. And yeah, there's a lot of really bad things that can come from lightning strike, obviously. Like it's a burn, it's electrocution, it's terrible. But Lichtenberg formations are kind of like an interesting factoid, and it is what we call pathognomonic. It is a classic sign of a lightning strike. Super interesting. So I'll put a picture in there so you can see it. Okay, here's another one. Injuries that occur to the body at high altitudes, including pulmonary or cerebral edema. So that means fluid where it shouldn't be, either in the lungs or on the brain. It occurs due to hypoxia, which is the body is not getting enough oxygen. Because as we increase our altitude, the pressure in the atmosphere decreases. And so the pressure that is pushing down oxygen also decreases, so the oxygen is more kind of spread apart. So you can't really get the oxygen easily from the air that you would need. As a result of that, hypoxia can lead to all this kind of stuff, swelling in the brain and fluid in the lungs and stuff like that. And the best way to manage that is to bring that person back down to altitude. So bring them back down to, atmospheric temperature or atmospheric altitude. But there are other things you can do in the meantime. For example, medications like acetazolamide or steroid medication. Those things can help temporize things, but really you need to get that person out of that space. So kind of an interesting thing. Okay, the treatment for carbon monoxide poisoning is oxygen. That's kind of an interesting thing. And when you're trying to assess the oxygen saturation level of a patient who is dealing with carbon monoxide poisoning, it's difficult to get a really accurate reading. And so you need something called a co-oximeter to actually get a sense of what it really is. Because carbon monoxide binds in place of oxygen preferentially. So the way to treat that is to flood the system with oxygen so that it competitively, essentially outcompetes for those binding spots to be able to distribute oxygen to the body. That's kind of a crazy thing. Carbon monoxide poisoning is often something that happens to people who are involved in like house fires and stuff like that. Really terrible stuff. Another common thing that can happen in that setting is cyanide poisoning, because cyanide is released into the air when plastics and things like that are burned. And thyroid disease. The thyroid is a little gland that sits here, and it helps with metabolism and a lot of different functions throughout the body. Some thyroid diseases can cause your hair to thin out. Not good. I think I'm okay. Today anyways. Who knows about tomorrow? Gut bacteria. So, gut bacteria lives inside of our intestines and the whole thing in there. And everyone's gut bacteria is a little bit different, and it's highly influenced by where you live and what you eat and all that kind of stuff. But a lot of studies are suggesting that your gut bacteria can really have a big impact on your mental health and the way of thinking and stuff like that. Super interesting. I don't understand it, but I like it. I will say that. So you are what you eat, in a way. Sort of. Okay. You can lower your cholesterol. Now hear me out. You can lower your cholesterol by eating nuts, plant-based sterols, soluble viscous fiber, and soy-based protein. Now, you may be thinking, gee, Chillwave, that sounds a lot like a vegan or plant-based diet. And yes, these are some key bits from a plant-based diet that have been studied and shown to be as effective at cholesterol lowering as some medications that are used to lower cholesterol. So it's kind of an interesting tidbit, and a lot of advice that people give around lowering your cholesterol is to avoid foods that are rich in saturated fat and animal-based fat. And if you look at the nutritional facts on a package of nuts or something like that, it'll say that nuts are high in saturated fat. But what's interesting, and the exception to the rule, is that your body doesn't really access a lot of those fats because your body doesn't really break down the nut to the level that it would need to do that. So, just a little interesting tidbit. Okay, here's another interesting one. When you go under general anesthetic for surgery, sometimes medications are given to sedate you, but also to paralyze you temporarily. That's a crazy thing. And if you've ever heard of anesthetic awareness, that's this whole scary thing where someone would get not enough sedation, but too much paralytic agent, and so they would be there and not sedated, but paralyzed. That is an extremely rare, wild thing that essentially almost never happens, but apparently can and does happen. That's pretty wild. Not all surgeries require paralysis. It depends on the type of surgery and what's going on. It depends on how the anesthesiologist wants to secure your airway, because that's the most important thing. We need to breathe, and so their cardinal job, their primary job, is to protect the airway. So, just kind of a cool factoid. Okay, let's talk about carpal tunnel syndrome. Whoa, that's interesting. So, the carpal tunnel, it's right here on the base of the palm of the hand. And this little space is basically like a hardened, what they call like fascia. It's like a really kind of durable ligament that runs across this space here. And it creates, with the bony structures around it, a passage or tunnel. And the things that pass through there, most of them are the tendons that are responsible for flexing the fingers and working the fingers. The muscle for those is in the forearm, and then the tendon runs up and into the hand and the finger to let you do your thing. But there's a big old nerve in there called the median nerve, and what can happen is if you're down and typing for a long time and you're really resting a lot on here, or if you're working with your hands a lot in a very physical job like jackhammering and things like that, what can happen is that pressure repeatedly over time can cause inflammation and swelling of that nerve. And unfortunately, there's not like a ton of space for that nerve to really swell. And so, because it's in a confined space and it gets swollen and inflamed, it basically gets kind of pinched a little bit. And that causes, it can cause numbness in the fingers, it can cause weakness, and it can cause pain. And the median nerve sensory information to the first 3 digits of the finger. And so people, oftentimes it's the first symptom that someone might notice is they might get pins and needles in their finger. So yeah, kind of an interesting tidbit. Okay, that's the end of the list that I generated. Let me know what you think about that. Maybe it was too dark. Maybe it was too weird. I don't know. I work in an emergency department, so a lot of stuff that I see is more related to like injuries and like kind of wild stuff like that. I think it's interesting. Let me know what you think. And of course the disclaimer, as always guys, none of this is medical advice. None of this is anything that you should act on or do anything with. It's just something for you to be like, huh, that's kind of interesting. Isn't that weird? Because that's what I think, and that's why I'm sharing it with you. Okay, let's check out what other people in the world have said about the body. Let's have a look here. Your skull is made of 29 different bones. That's pretty wild. And the skull, it's interesting because they all kind of fit together really tightly. And there's all these like bony sinuses and caverns and stuff inside the skull. The skull is a really interesting thing. Okay. The human heart pumps 182 million liters of blood during the average lifetime. I mean, that's a lot of blood. I will say a lot of that is like, recycling and stuff like that. But yeah, that's a pretty good volume. The heart is a pretty magnificent pump, I will say that. The human embryo acquires fingerprints within 3 months of conception. I did not know that. That's crazy. A man named Charles Osborne hiccuped for a total of 68 years. Terrible. Terrible. That is not great. I will say that. 68 years of hiccuping, not great. I can share with you a fun trick that I use to try to stop myself from hiccuping sometimes. This is a real thing. Now, this doesn't work if you have like a medical condition that is causing you to hiccup. But for standard issue, run-of-the-mill, drink too much Mountain Dew kind of hiccups, what you have to do is take a deep breath, hold your breath, pinch your nose at the same time, swallow 3 times while you're holding your breath and pinching your nose. And then after you've swallowed 3 times, that's really hard to do, then you breathe out slowly through your mouth and then release your nose. I'm telling you, it's a cure for hiccups. It's the craziest thing. So, hold your breath, plug your nose. Swallow 3 times while holding your breath with your nose plugged. Don't breathe at all during that time, unless you need to. If you need to breathe, please breathe. And then breathe out slowly. And if you can do that, it often works. I don't know. It's just a little trick. Call it a wives' tale. I don't know. Call it a legend. But breathe if you need to breathe. Okay. Only 7% of people are left-handed. That can't be right. Is that right? That seems crazy to me. It should be more than 7%, I would imagine. The fragrance of apples and bananas can help a person lose weight. I mean, I should start stocking up on apples and bananas, guys, and put it that way. Human lips are hundreds of times more sensitive than the tips of the person's fingers. That's interesting. I could see it. Parthenophobia is a fear of virgins. Oh my god. What? I didn't know that was a thing. And we're going to move right along from that. Okay. You can lose 150 calories per hour if you hit your head against the wall. Well, we're not going to do that, are we? That seems insane. Why would anyone even put that in here? A person who smokes a pack of cigarettes a day is doing the equivalent of drinking half a cup of tar a year. Oh my goodness. Well, yeah, lots of chemicals and that stuff. Bad for you. Fingernails grow 4 times faster than your toenails. Well, I mean, I think that seems to track with my lived experience. I think so. At birth, a child's body is made up of around 300 bones, but as an adult, just 206. Oh Okay, that's unique. That's very interesting. I wonder if that's because of growth plates. Have you heard of growth plates? When we're kids, there's like a separate bony structure that exists around most of the bones in our body. And the bone grows between this little space between these things. And then eventually what happens is the growth plate fuses with the bone, and then it's a done deal. I wonder if that's what they're talking about. Probably. There are about 40,000 bacteria in the human mouth. I could see that. That's something. That's something for sure. Children grow faster in the spring. That can't be. That can't be a thing. That sounds crazy, guys. I've not vetted any of this. I don't know if that's, don't quote me on that. Children grow faster in the spring. How could that possibly be the case? They're like Cabbage Patch Kids or something. I guess the sun, maybe, I don't know. I can't work with that one. By the age of 60, most people lose half their taste buds. Terrible. Terrible. I won't do it. I can't. The rate at which a person's hair grows doubles during an airplane flight. No way. That can't be the case. Can that be real? How does that make sense? Let's think about it. So, in airplane flight, the cabin pressure is less than what it would typically be on the ground. So maybe the hair follicles are less obstructed by atmospheric pressure, and that's why. I don't know, guys. If you know the answer to that one, let me know, because I'm actually genuinely curious about why that would happen. So pilots must be getting their haircut constantly. Oh my god, like flight attendants and stuff, constantly getting their haircut. Oh, this is crazy. Bones are about 5 times stronger than steel. Not mine, I will say that. I've had some broken bones in my day. Ingrown toenails are hereditary. Terrible. Terrible. I didn't get that gene, thankfully. I got the sneezing one. You can't pick them. You can't win them all. You can't pick your genes that you get. Speaking of sneezing, it's impossible to sneeze with your eyes open. I believe that because I've tried to do it, and you can't. So I'm looking at the light, and then I sneeze. I have to close my eyes. Someone once told me that your eyes would fly out of your head if you could sneeze with your eyes open. And I don't know if that's true, and I don't want to test it, and you shouldn't test it either. Just a little tidbit from me. The average life expectancy is 2,475,000. No, wait. I've got that number wrong. 2,475,000,000. No, wait. I swear I can count. I can count, guys. 2,475,576,000 seconds. During this time, we pronounce, on average, around 123,205,750 words, and have sex 4,239 times. Wow. I mean, some of us. That's all I'm going to say. Okay. Teeth are the only part of the human body which cannot heal themselves. That's very interesting. And a lot of people would say, well, the brain doesn't regenerate itself. And it's not technically true. There's a lot of remodeling that happens in the brain, which, in a way, you could call healing. There's a lot of those, like, oxidative free radicals and, like, waste products that get kind of resolved and dealt with. That's a bit of healing that happens. And then there are some spots in the brain that do generate new brain cells. Interesting. One of them is your olfactory bulbs, which are responsible for your sense of smell. A kiss increases a person's pulse to 100 beats per minute or more. Yeah, I mean, I guess maybe. I think probably there's a lot of variability between people, but I could see it. It seems to make sense. I could see that happening. Okay, let's see here. Laid end to end, an adult's blood vessels could encircle the Earth equator 4 times. Whoa. I believe that because if you imagine, like, after it leaves you, the blood travels through the aorta from the heart, which is like the main trunk of blood, and then it continuously breaks off into smaller and smaller tributaries, and some of them are tiny, like little capillary beds, and there's a ton of them, and they're very dense. so that makes sense to me. You lose about 4 kilograms of skin every year. Oh no, that's terrible to think about. That's a lot of... Let's see if there are 8 billion people in the world. 4 kilograms, oh my goodness. That's a lot of kgs of skin out there just getting shedded out. My goodness. Okay, babies don't shed tears until they're at least 1 month old. That's very interesting. Okay, information zooms along nerves at about 400 kilometers an hour. That's also very interesting and makes sense. Action potentials. Very cool. Humans are the only species known to blush. That's also very interesting. I will say I didn't know that. I will say that. Your blood makes up about 8% of your body weight. I think that makes some sense for sure. Let's see here. What do we got here? We are about 70% water. Yes, that makes a ton of sense. Lots of water. We need it. We love it. We have copper, zinc, cobalt, calcium, magnesium, phosphates, nickel, silicon in our bodies. Yep, we are complex people. It is believed that the main purpose of our eyebrows is to keep sweat out of our eyes. Yes, I think that makes a lot of good sense. We exercise at least 36 muscles when we smile. I think that's accurate. I think it makes a lot of sense. Our blood is on a 60,000-mile journey every day. Now, I don't know where that tracks with the other point we just got about the equator, but you know, I haven't vetted a lot of this stuff, but it's interesting, I will say that. We give birth to over 200 billion red blood cells every day. I believe that. Okay, what do we got here? A red blood cell can circumnavigate your body in under 20 seconds. Wow, it's a fast little guy. A sneeze generates a wind of 166 kilometers per hour, or 100 miles an hour. And a cough moves out at 100 kilometers an hour, or 60 miles an hour. That's crazy. You don't want to be standing in the blast radius of that, I'll tell you. Wow. Oh my goodness, we'll leave you with this last one. A person can expect to breathe in about 45 pounds of dust over his or her lifetime. That's a lot of dust. That is a lot of dust. And it makes me wonder about how many spiders are crawling into my mouth while I'm sleeping. Let's not go there. Let's just not go there. Guys, thank you so much for joining today. That was a ton of fun. The gum, delicious. The facts, interesting. And I hope you enjoyed it as well. Let me know if there's any other types of subject matter or interesting things you want me to have a look at and chat about. I'd be super down to do that. And I really appreciate you. Definitely hit the subscribe button and stick around for future videos. And I appreciate you so much. So have an awesome day, guys.